I'd like to thank the Global Content Bazar for this platform. I'm going to speak about post-production process in content creation. My background is in feature documentary and short films. I hope these next 30 minutes can be of benefit to everyone in the room, whether you're a content creator or a buyer. So I'm here to talk about color management in post-production, and also we're going to touch a bit on storage and preservation of content for long-term use and for future exploitation. It's something that has come up recently where I don't know how many of you all actually have all of your content stored on hard drives. If you could just raise your hand. And how many of you all are actually using a long-term storage medium like optical or tape? So yeah, just a small general consensus from the room. So I don't think anyone's thought of long-term storage as yet because the transition to digital was very recent, but this is something that will come up once your hard drives start failing. But I will touch upon that and how to kind of preserve your content for the future. So these are some of the projects that we've been part of. As colorists, as workflow designers, I started my journey in the film industry with a curiosity in photography, and that followed into post-production. And I was very lucky to be studying at the point when the transition from film to digital happened. There were a lot of problems that content creators, filmmakers faced during that transition period. A lot of it dealt with exhibition, a lot of it dealt with preservation. There were multiple custom workflows designed by post houses to try and deal with digital images. Everyone was either shooting on a Sony camera or a Viper film stream camera. The process for all of these the post-production process for all of these films differed greatly depending on where you went. Today, that situation no longer exists. There is a much simpler way to deal with content, and I will go into detail in that. So what is color management exactly? So it's essentially the controlled conversion between the color representations of various devices. Now, a lot of you all would have faced this issue when you have content created on a certain device, then displaying incorrectly when viewed on another device. And this is something that color management takes care of, because it is making sure that you're converting your content correctly for every different display device, because each device has its own different color space, and we'll get into that as well. So a good color management system lays the foundation of your creative work and also helps derive future possible deliverables. And this is something where a lot of us are facing right now, where we've created content in the last 10 years are now having to license to, say, Netflix and Amazon, and having to create new deliverables because their requirements are different from what we had actually mastered maybe 10 years ago. So these are the color spaces that we kind of deal with today. If you are a content creator, if you are working in the feature, short film, documentary industry, these are the cameras that you're working with. These are the different color spaces that these cameras are working in. So you have the Arri Alexa, which is the most popular, along with the Red, which both shoot linear raw images, but they're interpreted in a post-production system as a log image. Each log encoding from every manufacturer is different, and the tools that are designed for manipulating these images also date back to the film era, where we were dealing with raw images. There is now a transition to dealing with linear light images, which is ACEs, which is what we will get into. So the tools also have started changing. We have a new generation tool set by almost every manufacturer that deals with images now in linear light, which allows you to work with the image in a much larger container. The images that we capture in today's date are also of a much higher dynamic range. Earlier, we were limited to cameras that could only capture about 7 to 10 stops of light, and now you have cameras that go from 12 to 14. So you are capturing much more information, and the tools are now advancing so that you're allowed to actually use all of that extra information. Also, display devices in today's date are capable of showing you all of that extra information. So as end users, this is essentially where your content is being consumed, either on a computer display or on a cell phone. Those actually work in a sRGB color space. Broadcast TV works in Rec 709. You have cinema, which works in P3. And then you have the future standards which are now coming up. You have UHD 4K HDR TVs available right now, which are designed for a Rec 2020 workspace, which is much larger. But we're only just getting into it. The CES that just happened, you had 8K HDR TVs recently, and that is something that will slowly become more mainstream. And with that, you will have newer color spaces, which will be much wider with higher dynamic range, which you will have to master to. Because if you are creating content for, say, an OTT platform that does deliver 4K or HK HDR, they will ask you for the highest possible deliverable that you can generate. So in terms of display technology, a lot has evolved in the market over time. Currently, you have television sets which are either LED, LCD. Plasma is something that came and has gone, is now replaced by OLED with the same high contrast levels. You have cinemas which transition from 35mm projection to 2K and now 4K projectors. And now you will have a new generation of projectors starting from this year is the laser projector in cinemas. I think there are some in Bombay which have installed it. I think the Inox has now switched to laser. And all the others, I think the big experience cinemas like IMAX will also be switching to laser projection, which allows a much higher luminance and a higher contrast ratio for images. So this is just a small idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about display color spaces. So when you talk about sRGB, if you see the triangle at the bottom right, it can encapsulate only a certain amount of colors. So this display essentially can only show you these colors, whereas the larger triangle, which is all the colors, that is what the human eye can see. So there is a certain limitation of devices currently, which are sRGB devices, which are your computer displays, your cell phones, of only being able to display these colors. When we move into broadcast TV, it is also the same. The only difference is in the gamma. It is when we moved into cinema is that we had the opportunity to explore a larger color gamut as content creators, where this started with the use of Pixar when they generated computer-generated images for Toy Story. They created images which had colors which were not possible to project on regular displays. So that's why the new standards were created, and that is called P3, which has a much larger color gamut compared to, say, broadcast TV. And your current, which is the 4K UHD TVs which are available, are designed for Rec 2020, which is a much, much larger color space. This is also a future standards color space where the SMPTE group is trying to make sure that all cameras can shoot and capture all the colors which can be encapsulated in the Rec 2020 space, so that there is a direct translation to a display device. So even manufacturers of television sets and projectors are moving to hit a target of Rec 2020, which can show all of these colors. So if you see, as a comparison between the three, Rec 2020 is much larger. There is a possibility that we will have a newer standard down the line in the future, which will be much larger, and which content aggregators or companies that acquire content will ask you for a new master, because they want to show it on their platform on a display device which can show much more. So the four main reasons why we need color management. One is to communicate creative intent. It makes sure that your deliverable for television, for cinema, for any other platform is identical. It reduces the time and cost associated with creating these deliverables, and that is what ACES does, which I will explain in a minute. And also for preservation and future exploitation. This is something that a lot of people are now doing, where studios are now making sure that their films are mastered for ACES, so that when they preserve it, they can actually load up the files maybe 10 years down the line, and if they need to create a new master for a new platform, for a new display device, they can very easily. And this is what ACES is. It's been in production for the last 10 or so years. A lot of scientists have been working on it. A lot of post-production professionals, camera professionals have been contributing to the new standard. And it has become the industry standard now. It's being used all the way from content acquisition in shooting to editing to VFX and color grading and mastering. Also, it's free and open source. If you are a person who wants to contribute to ACES development, you can actually log on to the ACES Central website and contribute. It was designed to address the loss of standards, as I said, when we transitioned to digital. And right now, almost every Hollywood production and a lot of Indian productions are using ACES. In fact, the last 5 projects that we did, including Trapped, Newton, are all ACES productions, which means that the production house, if they need to, they have an ACES master to go back on. And if 10 years down the line, they want to re-release it for another platform, for a different color space, they can do that. As opposed to if they would work with the older workflow where you were working within a display color space, if they had to create a new master, they would have to go back to the original rushes, they would have to find the project files. 10 years down the line, maybe those project files won't open because the version of the software has changed, the version of the operating system has changed, and you can't access the same creative data that you'd used. So why we need it is to provide a consistent interchange of images across different systems. This is really helpful in post-production when you're transferring files from one vendor to another. A lot of big productions rely on multiple VFX vendors. It's important that all of them are actually seeing the same image and getting the same file. So it's very important that all of them actually switch to ACES. It is future-proof and cross-platform. It is a long-term archive format as well. And it's compatible with all existing devices right now. The way ACES works is that you have IDT, which is manufacturer supplied, which is used to transform from a camera space into the ACES working space, which is much larger. And you have an ODT, which is the display device transform. And that is used to convert for a display device. So currently, all the displays that are available in the world, all of them have ODTs available. So you can master for any display that's currently available and with the provision to master for any other future display device that comes into existence. So this is how the system works. So ACES also works with film. So even if you are acquiring on 16 or 35 millimeter film, you can scan into an ADX space, which is ACES compatible, and bring it into ACES space and work on it. This allows you to also mix and match cameras and formats. So you're not limited to using a particular camera in an ACES production. You can actually use anything, and you can bring it into ACES space. So this is what it does. It basically makes deliverable processing much easier. From ACES, you can derive any deliverable, whether it is an IMF for Netflix or Amazon, whether it's a DPX sequence for Scrabble or Cube, or it is a DCP, or it is a HDMOV for broadcast television. So when it comes to archiving, what ACES does is that it creates a new master, which is a 16-bit OpenEXR floating file, which allows you to store all of the camera information that could possibly be stored in a single file. This file can then be stored on a certain form of long-term storage. Now, what is preferred currently in the industry in India and Hollywood and other film industries is LTO, which is a tape format. It's a tape format that stores data on tape rather than video. Again, it's an open format, so it's accessible. It is supported by HP, IBM, and Quantum, so it has the backing of industry titans, and it has a roadmap for the next, I would say, next decade. It has existed for a long time in the IT industry as a backup solution, and lately, with the advent of digital filmmaking, it has become the de facto standard for storing digital images. What it allows you to do is actually move away from film, which was the preferred archiving format earlier, where you needed a vault at a certain temperature and a lot of space, a lot of energy to actually store a negative. ACES files are now that new negative, and those can be stored in a much more cost-effective way without using too much energy, without using too much space, on a simple tape, which is magnetic. You can have multiple backups so that they're very cost-effective, very cheap. And it also prevents, a simple hard drive from just being accessed by anyone. The thing with LTO tape is that you do need a tape recorder to access it, but since that is not readily available, it's better so your content isn't just, if a hard drive gets lost or something, it's not in the hands of anyone that can access it. Also, with hard drives, the problem is that you have a very, very high failure rate with hard drives. And this is a test that Backup was conducted where they actually dropped hard drives from a certain height and dropped LTO tapes and did a comparison. But the failure rates of hard drives are very, very high. So it's very important that if you have content that actually costs a few crores or even a few lakhs, that you store it on a medium that isn't easily destructible or prone to damage. In terms of shelf life, hard drives are essentially designed to be kept spinning throughout their life. And that is what the manufacturer states, that they'll give you a 3 or a 5 year warranty if your hard drive is obviously spinning throughout in a server. But LTOs are designed to be stored on a shelf. It doesn't use any energy that way, and you can access it whenever you need to. There is a newer standard now which was just released a couple of months ago, which is LTO Generation 8. This allows you to actually store 12 TB of data on a single tape. That means an entire film's ACES master can be stored on a single tape in 4K. Also now, why you should archive. So this is something that Netflix, Amazon, and all of the major OTT platforms are asking for. They're asking you for an NAM, which is a non-graded archival master. They're asking you for a GAM, which is a graded archival master, and a VDM. All these three things are important for archiving your projects for the future, for future exploitation. The reason is that you will in the future maybe need to access the non-graded master for maybe regrading for creative intent. The graded archival master is essentially your baked grade within an ACES file so that you can create new deliverables without having to touch the content creatively. And the video display master is essentially for exhibition right now on current display devices, depending on the color space that you want to master to. They will also ask you to archive your color grading projects for your creative decisions also to be saved, and if needed, the projects to be opened for further tweaking. The advantage with all the major color grading systems is that they also allow you to archive those files in a way that they always point back to the version number of the software, so that if you need to open the file again, you can refer back to the original version that you created that file in. A lot of times it happens that you move to a different OS over time, or you move to a different version of the software over time. When you reopen that project in that version of software, you might not see the same result because tools have changed, the code underneath that software has changed. So it's very important to actually archive the project and note down the version number that you created in so you can actually open it later down the line. You should also archive all of your audio, your final sound mixes, and all the elements, the stems, the M&E. This is something that they will ask you for creating dubbed versions for local languages. Netflix releases in 190 countries, so they make sure your content is localized and subtitled or dubbed for different countries. Also, all of your Pro Tools sessions, all of your editorial projects, whether it's Final Cut, Avid, or Premiere Pro, and all of your different cuts. There is a question also that usually comes up regarding the cloud, whether we should actually archive in the cloud. One of the limitations currently with the cloud is also the bandwidth that we have. We have very, very limited bandwidth here. And it's not really tested and proven like LTO is to be an offline storage medium for long term. Also, there are instances of cloud storage being hacked. This is something that is very important for content that is that has IP that is easily leaked. Also, its carbon footprint in terms of LTO is much, much higher